Okay, so my name is Natalie Fine, and I'm going to be going over Jim Burke's classroom management book that we read over or winter break. So the first portion of his book goes over his classroom management, which is under his category of like your classroom. He goes over five main things that is necessary for good classroom management. So the first thing is create a positive first impression. And this means by establishing expectations regarding behavior, culture, politics, and procedures right away. So like the start of class, establish those expectations. Also means communicate and apply these expectations clearly and consistently. So make sure they're well understood, as well as get to know each other through academic and social activities. So an example of doing this could be like student interest sample questions or surveys on the first day of class. He also recommends create a classroom environment that makes room for fun and comfort while emphasizing learning. And also about making a good positive first impression is by dressing and acting and speaking like a caring, serious professional. A second part under classroom management was maintain a positive and productive relationship with all students. So establish and maintain a professional relationship with your students by setting high expectations, help students by reaching out to them, and show actual personal interest into all your students inside and outside of the classroom. Another part of classroom management is use the walls to educate and communicate and celebrate. So this means decorate your classroom to teach and reinforce key content and skills, as well as using the space for showcasing students' work and communicating essential information and that you can dedicate on like a bulletin board and stuff. And lastly, under his classroom management, he says assign seats based on individual and instructional needs. So consider students' individual needs when you're making a seating chart, and also arrange the desk to maximize use of space. So next, in his book, he goes into instruction. So his key ideas for having effective instruction include also four main things. And so the first one is begin the period efficiently. So use the time before class begins to set up your class lesson and greet your students. Also, take care of logistical and administrative details at the very beginning of the class so you're not like left doing that like in the middle of your lesson. Also, create and maintain a flexible routine for beginning of class so that way students, when they come in, they know exactly what to do when they sit down. And also, it's good to just like communicate to students what they'll be doing for that day. So like showing a daily agenda is always helpful. Number two under effective instruction is end the period productively. So establish and maintain a flexible and predictable routine, just like the warm-up. When you begin the class, you want to also have like a routine when you end the class. For number three, he recommends provide a disciplined, supportive classroom environment. So this means like promote a strong work ethic within your classroom, cultivate and emphasize adaptability in your students, establish and maintain high expectations for all students on all assignments. And then lastly, for effective instruction, he says manage group instruction productively. So provide the necessary conditions for effective group work. So this means make sure that when students are working in group work, they're being monitored correctly and efficiently, as well as they have the means and all of the necessary things they need to work productively together, if that makes sense. So then moving on to the third part, so it's differentiation. And in Jim Burke's book, he has this under learning for all category. So it's broken down into also four main key things to learn about. So the first one is meeting the needs of all students. So make sure that you differentiate instruction so that it works best as a guide for lessons and teaching to all types of students. So, and then he breaks down in his book meeting the needs for English language learners, as well as special needs students and students with learning disabilities. So he breaks that down under that category. And then for his discipline section, he puts down four main key points for having positive discipline in the classroom, and those are broken down into teach self-discipline and personal responsibility. So this means like develop students' awareness of what is appropriate in a given situation. So this means establish the guidelines for what should be correct in the classroom and what should be done right, so that way students, if they know they do it wrong, they know what to expect as discipline. Number 2 is administer discipline with dignity. So this means attend to all details regarding behavior, movement, and interaction. Respond quickly, effectively to students' behaviors before trouble begins, as well as address students in an objective tone regarding behavior and attitude. So pretty much means you be assertive with your discipline if you're going to do it. Like, don't kind of like feed around the bush and be like, oh, well, like, I'm sorry you kind of did this, so I have to do this. Like, be assertive with it. And number 3 is communicate policies, procedures, and principles in your syllabus. So it's definitely important to put your policies and your principles in your syllabus, so that way when students enter your class on the first day, they know exactly what to expect and what potential disciplines can happen to them. And then lastly, under effective discipline is establish and maintain an effective approach to discipline. So it's important to try to prevent discipline problems before they even start. So it's always good to be paying attention to your class, because you never know when little things like bickering in the back of the classroom is going to happen, and then it will escalate. Also, use discipline to provide students with feedback about their behavior. So that's also important to show, like, correct students about their behavior, so that way they know what they're doing wrong. And then lastly, in the end of his book, he goes over other issues, and he labels this under like troubleshooting. And then at the end of this book, he kind of just breaks down what problems to watch for several different things. So he breaks down problems to watch for when students don't like turn in work, as well as are tardy or not attending class. He breaks down how important record keeping is, and so this is like things like health info, special ed info, procedural info, attendance, things like that. So that way you always have a record of stuff going on in your classroom, just in case it gets brought up, as well as anything or preventions and responses to students having like abuse issues. So any student like going through like sexual, physical, verbal, or emotional abuse, procedures and how to deal with that, which is always so good to have. Also, problems to watch for students for cheating, like on tests and assignments, as well as how to prevent or address problems with the use of materials and equipment in the classroom. So like if you're in a science class, like proper instruction of how to like handle a glass beaker, stuff like that. He also recommends keeping a binder for substitutes, so that way you have like the material and everything easy accessible for your substitutes when they come in. And then it's also important to be very, very aware of like emergency situations, so fire drills, lockdowns, any earthquake drills. So it's really important to always have that information of what to do available for you and your students. And then lastly, he covers importance of information to cover over conferences. This could be with parent-teacher conferences, or even with teacher and teacher conferences. So, and then he also touches a little bit on field trips, but field trips aren't as common, I say so, in like high school level, which I'm teaching currently right now. But that pretty much concludes Jim Burke's classroom management book. Thank you.